Hollywood's golden age didn't just sell fantasy, it hid crimes. Behind locked studio gates, fame became immunity. For the stars who made millions, the law was negotiated, silenced, or erased in smoke-filled rooms. This is not gossip. This is the record they tried to bury. Tonight we expose Hollywood's secret criminals and the machine that protected them. The control of image began with the policing of morality itself. Long before the industry faced the threat of federal law, it faced the threat of the public's own judgment. In the 1920s, the screen was a place of burgeoning liberation, and no one embodied this more than Mae West. At her peak, West was the highest-paid woman in America, a titan of double entendre. A self-made vaudeville star turned Paramount's biggest box office draw. West saved the studio from bankruptcy with her sharp wit and overt sexuality. But in 1927, the law came for her Broadway play, titled simply Sex. Charged with corrupting the morals of youth, West was sentenced to 10 days in the workhouse on Welfare Island. While the studio publicists panicked, West leaned into the scandal, dining with the warden and emerging as a martyr for free expression, and served only 8 days for good behavior. West used the conviction as a marketing tool. However, her defiance led directly to the strict enforcement of the Hays Code in 1934, as the industry scrambled to prove it could police its own immorality. This set of censorship rules would govern Hollywood for decades, forcing the industry's darker impulses even further underground. While West thrived on scandal, others found themselves caught in a changing political and social tide. Charlie Chaplin, the beloved little tramp, was a global icon of the common man. However, his private life was a minefield of controversy. In 1944, he faced a federal indictment for violating the Mann Act, transporting a woman across state lines for immoral purposes, following a paternity suit by starlet Joan Barry. Though Chaplin was legally acquitted of the Mann Act charges, a subsequent paternity suit, despite blood tests proving he wasn't the father, destroyed his reputation. The media reaction was vitriolic. The public, fueled by McCarthy-era whispers of Chaplin's leftist sympathies, turned on him. The studios, once his greatest allies, realized they could no longer protect an icon who'd become a political liability. As an independent mogul, Chaplin had no studio fixer. When he left for a premiere in London in 1952, his re-entry permit was revoked. He was effectively exiled from America for his un-American sympathies and private scandals, a reminder that the same system that builds a god can just as easily excommunicate him. The fragility of the star system was never more apparent than in the case of Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. In 1921, he was the king of comedy, having just signed a $1 million contract with Paramount. But a wild party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco ended in the death of actress Virginia Rappe. Arbuckle was accused of a brutal sexual assault that led to her death. Hearst newspapers invented lurid details, painting the gentle Arbuckle as a monster. After 3 trials and a media circus, Arbuckle was fully acquitted, with the jury even issuing him a formal apology. But the damage was total. The studios blacklisted him immediately, scrubbing his films from the screens. The industry used Arbuckle as a scapegoat to show they were cleaning up Hollywood. His films were banned overnight. The man who was once the industry's greatest joy died in obscurity, a victim of the very publicity machine that created him. Contrast his fate with that of Wallace Reed, the all-American boy. At the height of his fame, Reed was a victim of the industry's own demands. Known as the screen's most perfect lover, Reed was the face of Paramount. He was the athletic, clean-cut hero of the silent era. However, in 1919, while filming on location, Reed was injured in a train wreck. To keep their star on set and the cameras rolling, the studio, Paramount, supplied him with morphine. What followed was a tragic descent into addiction. Unlike Arbuckle, the studios tried to hide Reed's condition, fearing the loss of their leading man. But you cannot hide a dying man forever. When he could no longer perform, the studio that hooked him suddenly found his presence a liability. He was committed to a sanitarium, effectively a private prison, where he died at age 31. Paramount pivoted from enabler to moral crusader, using Reed's death as a cautionary tale to satisfy temperance groups, neatly erasing their own role in his demise. As the 1930s bled into the 40s, the fixers arrived. To understand Golden Age crime, we must understand the fixer. Eddie Mannix was the vice president of MGM, but his real job was the janitor. He kept the stars out of jail and the scandals out of the papers. Mannix was the architect of the industry's shadow legal system. When a star was arrested for a DUI or found in a compromising position, it was Mannix who made the phone call to the LAPD. It was Mannix who allegedly ensured that the death of producer Thomas Ince on William Randolph Hearst's yacht remained a mystery. Mannix is allegedly linked to the suicide of Paul Byrne, husband of Jean Harlow, and the suspicious death of George Reeves, TV's Superman. It is widely alleged that Mannix used his connections with the LAPD and the mob to disappear evidence, bribe witnesses, and intimidate journalists. In the Golden Age, the studio was the law and Mannix was its enforcer. Even the most rebellious stars had to contend with the system. He quintessential film noir anti-hero, Robert Mitchum was the king of the lazy eye and effortless masculinity. In 1948, Mitchum was arrested in a sting operation for possession of marijuana, a reefer scandal that, at the time, was expected to end a career. In an era of strict anti-drug sentiment, this should have been the end. Mitchum famously said, "It's the end of my career. I'm cooked." But the public reaction was unexpected. Mitchum's bad boy persona actually resonated with a post-war audience weary of polished perfection. In a rare move, RKO Pictures didn't try to hide it. Howard Hughes, the studio head, realized Mitchum's bad boy image was his greatest asset. They leaned into the scandal. Mitchum became the first star to survive a drug conviction. He served 43 days at a California prison farm. His defiance echoed the modern cancel-proof celebrity, proving that if your brand is built on rebellion, the law can't touch your popularity. This selective justice was never more glaring than in the case of Errol Flynn. The ultimate swashbuckler, to be in like Flynn, became a cultural shorthand for effortless conquest. In 1942, the swashbuckling hero was charged with the statutory rape of 2 teenage girls. Despite the gravity of the charges, Flynn's legal team painted the victims as fast girls who led the star astray. Flynn's legal team painted the victims as opportunistic, and the public, largely male and enamored with Flynn's on-screen bravado, cheered his acquittal. The phrase "in like Flynn" entered the lexicon, transforming a serious criminal allegation into a bawdy joke. Flynn was protected because his masculinity was a commodity the studios couldn't afford to lose. The public of the 1940s seemingly prioritized the rapscallion persona over the safety of young women, a stark contrast to the modern era's reassessment of systemic abuse. But as we move deeper into the shadows, the crimes become impossible to fix. Some stars were not merely bad boys, but men of genuine violence. Paul Kelly was a handsome leading man of the 1920s. Kelly was involved in a secret affair with Dorothy McKay. When her husband, Ray Raymond, confronted Kelly, a fistfight ensued. Kelly beat Raymond so severely that he died of a brain hemorrhage days later. Kelly served 25 months in San Quentin for manslaughter. Remarkably, Kelly returned to Hollywood after his release. The studios, valuing his talent, rebranded him as a tough guy character actor. He even won a Tony Award later in life. It was a testament to the industry's ability to forgive violence, provided the star remained profitable. The most famous intersection of Hollywood glamour and organized crime occurred on Good Friday 1958 in the bedroom of Lana Turner. Turner was the sweater girl, an MGM goddess. Her lover was Johnny Stompanato, a mob enforcer for Mickey Cohen. On Good Friday 1958, Turner's lover Stompanato was found stabbed to death in Turner's home. The story shocked the world. Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, confessed to the killing, claiming she was defending her mother from Stompanato's violent rage. The inquest was a masterclass in studio intervention. Jerry Giesler, the lawyer to the stars, and the MGM machine went into overdrive. Turner gave a tearful, Oscar-worthy performance on the stand. The jury ruled it a justifiable homicide. To this day, rumors persist that Turner herself may have held the knife, and the studio moved the body or coached the testimony to protect their biggest star from a murder charge. Turner's career survived, but the veneer of the golden age was permanently cracked. Yet the darkest chapter belongs to a man whose crime was too horrific for even the fixers to touch. Spade Cooley was the king of Western swing, a massive television star in the 1950s. A massive star of television and music, Cooley was the Lawrence Welk of the West. However, behind the smile was a man consumed by jealousy and alcoholism. In 1961, in front of their 14-year-old daughter, Cooley brutally tortured and murdered his wife, Ella May. The details were gruesome. He tortured her for hours before she succumbed to her injuries. No studio could fix a crime this heinous. There was no intervention, no publicist spin. Cooley was sentenced to life in prison. He died of a heart attack during a performance while on a 72-hour furlough from prison at a benefit concert just before his parole. A grim end to a man whose legacy is now synonymous with a singular terrible act. And then there were those who existed in the gray space between the law and the legend. Frank Sinatra, a man whose voice defined a generation, was dogged for decades by his associations with the mafia. Old Blue Eyes didn't just play tough guys. His connections to the mafia are legendary. Sinatra operated above the traditional laws of Hollywood. While never convicted of a major mob crime, his 2,400-page FBI file tells a different story. He was cozy with Chicago boss Sam Giancana and was frequently seen with known hitmen. The feds tracked him for decades, convinced he was a money courier and a front for mob influence in Vegas. He was the original gangster wrapped in a tuxedo, the bridge between the glamorous front and the criminal backroom. The Golden Age was not a time of greater virtue, but of greater control. The criminals of Hollywood's past remind us that fame is a currency that can buy silence, but it can never truly buy redemption. The stars continue to shine, but now we know to look for the shadows they cast.